All right, everybody. So today I'm going to be taking you through a tutorial on how we're going to be using the R statistical package and RStudio. Okay, this is part one, which is just an introduction into R, how we put data in, and how we put variables in. So the first thing I'm going to do is take us over to our desktop, and we're going to simply open up RStudio. We've already installed that. If you don't know how to install it, look for the tutorial that I've posted on that. So I'm just going to type into my search bar RStudio, start typing it, and you see it pops up right away. So I'm going to click on RStudio, and it's going to open up our window. And it's got a few different components. So first of all, we see this panel over here on the left side, and it says console, and it basically just has a flashing cursor. We've got a couple of other panels that I'll sort of direct you towards later on. But let's just start off with what R is. We see here up at the top, it says R version 4.0.3, and that's just the version we've got, and they always have a funny name. This one's Bunny Wunnies Freak Out. And it just has some copyright information. So that's it. So what is R? What is this interface going to be used for? So you could think of it simply as a calculator. So I could just type in this panel right here, 1 plus 2. And what you see is it gives us an answer is 3. Okay, that's fine. I mean, that's not super interesting. We can use it as a calculator. Okay, great. But what's great about R is it has lots of different functions, just like Excel. So, for example, I could go ABS, which means the absolute value. I put in a open bracket of -6. And what we see is it responds with 6. Okay, again, not super interesting, but we can see how it can become useful. Or there's other functions, SQRT. So square root of, well, 16, we know what that should be, is 4. Okay, so we can see that there's all these different functions that we can use as well. So you can start to see that we can do things fairly quickly if I want to just find the square root or the absolute value of something. You may be asking, how do I know what these functions are? And the simple answer is, I simply don't typically, but there's so much help online. You can just Google square root in R, and you will find out what the function is really quickly. And people will give you examples of how you use that. Now, on the other hand, if you wanted to find out how to use the function square root, there's a couple ways you can do that. So the first would be just typing help, open bracket, SQRT, if you know the function's name already. Now, what you can see is right behind me here, it's opened up another piece of this panel here. And we can see there's miscellaneous mathematical functions. And so, for example, ABS computes the absolute value of x, square root x computes the principal square root of x. And it shows you a little bit about usage, and that's how you use it, and what the arguments are, or the items that you can put in each of these. Also, you can actually, it will give you examples. You can see here right down to the bottom, it's giving you an example of how you use that. Well, let's say I wanted to run that square root command again. Well, one thing I can do is type it in again, SQRT, and now I want the square root of 9 instead. One thing you'll notice is that in RStudio, it's actually auto-filling a lot of these items for me. If I start typing SQRT, right, I get to SQR, and it gives me some information that what's the possibilities. Oh, SQRT, and it tells me a little bit about it. I'm going to just, I could hit tab, and it'll finish and create some brackets for me already. I want the square root of 9. I hit enter, I get 3. Okay. Another thing I could do is I can actually use the up arrow, and that will take me through the previous commands I've already used. If I hit up arrow once, oh, there's square root 9. Again, oh, that's the one before it. Again, oh, there's where I did square root 16, right? We can see the commands that I did previously just by using the up arrow, and I can go back down through them. So I can cycle up and down with my up and down arrows through my previous commands. Okay, so I can do now square root of 36. Great, 6. Okay, that's fine, but where it becomes much more useful is if now you can assign data, your data like this, into variables. So let me give you an example. I'm going to assign a variable just called A, okay, the letter A. And what I'm going to do is use this function here. It basically looks like an arrow. So that just means put whatever I place after this into value A. All right, so I'm going to put value 1 into value A. And what we see now here is up in my environment, I have a new variable that is a numeric type. Its length of 1 and its value is 1. Let's give down here B, I'm going to give it a value of 3. You can see I've got a new variable and there's its value. Now I can create a new function that says C is A plus B. Oh, I made an error there. What we see is I put a capital B, and capital B is not an object. Only lowercase b is currently. So we see that R is case sensitive. So I'm just going to do that, up arrow once, and I can correct it very easily. Great. Now I've got a new function C, and interesting, you see that its value is 4. I mean, I can just type now C, and it gives me a value of 4. Now what happens if I change a variable's value? Well, let's look at B. B currently has a value of 3. If I type in B, I see it's got a value of 3. I can change B now to, I'm going to say I want to have a value of 6. I can type in B. Great, has a value of 6. Now if I go A plus B, its value is 7 because A is still 1, B value is still 6. Okay, now let's say we want to write a script so we can use our commands over and over again, one after another. What we're going to do is start off by creating an R project. And I'm just going to put that in a subfolder called R underneath my APA 6101 folder. So I'm going to go up to the File menu. I'm going to click on New Project. I'm going to say Save my workspace image to R data. Yes. It's going to be create a project. I'm going to create a new directory. And it's a new project. And I'm just going to call it R. And it's going to be a subfolder of APA 6101 of this year. Okay, and I'm going to say open. Great. And I'm going to click on Create Project. Okay, so now it's opened up this new project, and it's going to be saving into that space. The other thing I want to do is now create what will be called a script file. So I'm going to go up to File, New File, RScript. And what we see is it's opened up what it's calling untitled at this point, and I can save it. And all we see is it's a cursor flashing, but instead of being in a command prompt down here, it's in a different space. And what happens is I can maybe give my different commands in here. I could be I could say 1 plus 2, but you see nothing happens. All it does is it gives me a new line. What I can then do is highlight that and click on Run. And we see it will run my script in the output panel at the bottom. Now it's done that. The other thing I can do is hit Control and Enter at the end of a line, and it will do the same thing. But I find it easier just to highlight what I want and click Run. Okay, good so far. So now let's think about the different data types that we can have in R. So remember we had a data type that was a numeric. So I could say my numeric is 1. I will go and run that. And we see it creates a data type of a numeric of a length of 1 and its value is 1. A second type of data type in R is characters or text. And I'm just going to call it my character. And what I'm going to put into that is my name, Tony. And I put it in quotation marks. I hit Control Enter. And we see that this now has my character, its type is character, its length of 1, and its value is Tony. Great. Another data type that we have in R is a logical. So my logical. And I'm going to just put true in all capitals. Control Enter. And now we see that it's entered that. So I've got a value of true in the logical. Okay, so we see there's characters, numerics, logicals. Now, the next type is what we would call a vector, or in Excel or other programs, it's called an array. And that's just like a list of values, right? So I'm going to call it my vector. Vector. And I'm just going to use a capital because that's sort of the convention a lot of the time. That's sort of like a programming convention. So my vector, and I'm going to use now the letter C, and that means I'm going to concatenate or combine together a list of values. So my vector is going to be 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. And I'm going to maybe this time highlight that and hit run. And what we see is we've got a vector, which is a type of numeric, and its values is 1 through 5, and here are its values. Okay? So it's a vector of numerics. You can have vectors of other types of data as well. Okay, so now let's make another vector. This time I'm going to call this one even vector. And I'm going to give it the values of 0, 2, 4, 6, and 8. And I'm going to hit Control and Enter. And we can see we have the same sort of thing. Now, the last type of data structure I want to talk about is what's called a data frame. And what that is a set of equal-sized vectors. So if you try and combine multiple vectors into a data frame that are different size, it'll give you an error. They have to be the same length. So you see my vector and my even vector, right? They're both the same length. They're 5 items long. Let's create a logical vector that's different length. So we're going to call it logical vector. And I'm going to give it the values of true, capital, true, true, false, false. Note that I didn't type in the whole word true. All you need is the T or the F. And I'm going to hit Control Enter. And now I've got a vector of logicals here that is 4 long, and that's its values. Now, say I want to create a data frame, and that's just like an Excel sheet where it's got rows and columns, or multiple columns of the same length. So I'm going to try, let's do it down here. Well, let's do it up here. My data frame, and I'm going to use the command data.frame. And now it's going to ask for the vectors that I want. And I'm going to use, even vector, and my vector. And hopefully this gives us our data frame. Control Enter. All right. And what we see here is now I've got a new entry called my data frame. It's a type as data frame, and it's 5 observations of 2 variables. And you see it also comes with this little icon on the side here. And it looks like a little Excel sheet almost. And interestingly, I can click on that and it will now show you my 2 sets of data here. So here's my even vector and my vector. Great. Let's see what happens if I try to do that with not even vector and my vector, but let's even vector and logical vector. Control Enter. You see that it shows me that I've got an error in data frame. Arguments imply different number of rows, 5 and 4. And again, remember I said a data frame has to have the same number of rows for both of the columns. Okay, so I'm going to clear that. And in fact, I'm going to clear all of these variables in here. I don't need them anymore. I can just hit this sweep button. That's going to remove all objects from the environment. Yeah, I'm okay with that. Okay. The other thing I want to show you is, in fact, if I want to go back and look at some of the commands I ran, I can actually click on this History tab. And you can see that here's all the commands I've run so far. And I can always go back in here and scroll through them, or I can just search for them. Okay, so that's the end of part 1. So get the next video, which will get into a little bit more about how we use R to start to calculate our statistics.